council on Monday, May 23rd, 2022. Before we actually have the regular business meeting tonight, we actually have not one, not two, but three public hearings. So you'll enjoy those. I'm going to read a statement here about public hearings in just a moment. But I want to make note that we do have two council representatives who are participating via Zoom tonight. Councilman Nagel is in Georgia, and Councilman McKenna, we believe is on. Councilman McKenna was going to participate from home, but he's actually in an area of town that has a power outage, but apparently he's figured something out because they tell me he's on the line. So they'll be participating via Zoom. Also, I wanted to, I see that we have Dottie Sherrill here, and so it reminds us of the story I wanted to tell on Dottie. So this week was EMS weekend, and we want to recognize our emergency medical service personnel for the incredible job they do for our community. In fact, they told me that on Friday they had over a dozen medical emergency calls on Friday alone. So this weekend, because it's EMS week, I dropped off a cake at the fire hall. And when you get to the fire hall, the doors are supposed to close, but there's two buttons on the door, black button and a big red button. And besides the big red button, in red letters it says emergency. So I pressed the black button and dropped off my cake. I talked with Dottie today. Dottie done the same thing. She also delivered a cake this week to the fire department because it's the EMS week. But what did Dottie do? She pressed the red button, which then called 911. They then come on and say, "What is your emergency?" And she says, "I'm at the front door, I've got a cake." So 911 calls the fire department and says, "There's some lady at the front door with an emergency cake for you." So thank you, Dottie Sherrill. So tonight's meeting will include one or more, three actually, public hearings which have been duly advertised. This is an opportunity for you to speak on specific subjects. It is not general public comments that is reserved for later in this meeting. Normal rules of decorum apply to all comments, and duplicate comments are discouraged. If you wish to speak, you must identify yourself by name and state your street address. If in attendance at the meeting, you must come to the podium and speak so we all can hear you. If you wish for someone else to speak on your behalf, you should come forward and indicate who will be speaking for you. Comments during the hearing are generally limited to 3 minutes each. The town manager does keep time. If you hear her very annoying alarm, it means your 3 minutes is up. You don't have to stop mid-sentence, but it does mean you need to wrap up your thoughts. For those attending remotely, at the appropriate time, you'll be asked to raise a hand. If you'd like to give a comment, this is a function that's found in the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You must be recognized before giving your comment and asked to turn your video on during your comments if possible. Written comments timely received before the hearing will be provided to town council members, including as part of the minutes of the meeting and read into the record as time allows. If you want more information on how to submit comments in the future, please contact Town Hall. Thank you very much. Our first public hearing is on the 2022-2023 budget. Just to remind folks, we are in the middle of budget creation season, and we will have one more council workshop on June 21, I believe is correct, on that before hopefully finalizing the budget at our regular meeting in June. But tonight we'd like to hear from you all about what it is you might have on how we might structure that budget. So said all of that. And that's Butch Gudger, please come forward.
I'm going to speak tonight about the fire department. Some may not know all the details about how the fire department came about, and so I won't go into detail about that. But Weaverville Fire Department is one of the oldest in the state. So recently celebrated its 100th year anniversary. 50 years ago, okay, maybe longer than that, I graduated from high school and went to Vietnam, came back and got involved with the fire department. One of the most satisfying things I've ever done is my involvement with the fire department. At that time, the fire department was one of the 30% best in the entire state. We were known from end to end. And were recognized as such. The original fire department was built by firemen, people that wanted to be involved in the fire department. But it was also built by individuals. Block, block, block. They laid the block for the fire department. The town or district didn't pay for somebody to build the fire department. The firemen built it. The fire department has a rich tradition and was established and continues with pride. The Weaverville citizens deserve better protection, which comes from the support of the town council. In my opinion, one of the most important responsibilities of each council member is to provide the support to the agencies that protect the citizens. There is no task more important than the supporting our fire department. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I wanted to also add that typically during public hearings, it's an opportunity for council members to hear from you, hear your opinions and your ideas on how we should behave. It's not necessarily one where we'll be asking, answering questions or engaging in conversation. But basically, it's an opportunity for us to learn from you all. Having said that, Doug Sims, you're next.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here. First of all, I think that we are going to lose one of the most respectful fire chiefs in this county, Ted Williams. Ted was a fireman when I started. I was fire chief years ago. Was the first paid fireman for the town of Weaverville. Council, you have a responsibility to these guys to help them, to guide them, and to listen to your department heads on what is going on in these areas, police chief, fire chief. Town council is responsible for making personnel to make the fire department work as it should. Our taxpayers inside of the fire district, in the North Buncombe Fire District, along with the Weaverville District, our taxpayers are, a lot of them is here for the same reason we are, to make sure these guys get to pay and deserve the time that they do have. Weaverville Fire Department's insurance rating just went to a level 2 for the town of Weaverville, and a 5 outside of the town of Weaverville in the North Buncombe Fire District. You don't hear of that much. These guys has put in a lot of work to do this. Training, personnel, water, all these things come into play. When they started this fire tax or the lower the fire ratings, part of it was personnel. And we were in pretty good shape for personnel. But it seems like that we are losing firemen to other fire departments in the county, Fairview, Woodfin, West Buncombe, because their pay is not where it should be. The county of Buncombe, as I saw yesterday on the news, is raising their pay rate to $17 an hour for their employees to help with this. So as council, I would suggest that we do the same for our firemen, policemen, and everybody else. You say it's 10 minutes a week this week. These guys put in a lot of work. My son is the captain here on the fire department also. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Amanda Soul.
My name is Amanda Stoll, and I have lived here since I was 16 years old. I am an EMS instructor and have been for 24 years at AD Tech, which is over in Woodfin now, with their police, fire, and EMS training center. I just want to talk a little bit about what they do, since I've been teaching most of the guys that are in this room. We talk about first responders, and we kind of lump that into police, fire, and EMS. And we've been the heroes since 9/11, and since COVID and all of these things. But the fire department has moved quite forward from the times of the volunteer. I used to park my truck in the bar area of Twisted Laurel, working 24-hour shifts to respond. Back in the days when the firefighters were volunteers and the EMS crew had to go start their trucks so they would be warm when the guys got there from home or their jobs or wherever. Hopefully we won't have to go back to those days, because I can pretty much assure you that that kind of volunteerism does not exist anymore in fire service. You can find that around all of the county fire departments. And why are we first responders at the fire department? Well, even in medical emergencies or police emergencies, there are more fire departments than there are police stations. There are more fire departments than there are EMS stations. So these guys are the first people out. And it's not just fire that they fight. And as Doug said, how they perform affects home insurance that you pay by the ratings in your area. It's not just fire, it's inspections. They clear debris, storms such as today, when trees fall into the roadway or onto power lines. The firemen are the first people out to go and find out what they need to do in these situations. When fire alarms go out, when smoke detectors go off, when people's batteries run out of their fire alarms in the middle of the night, they call the fire department because they don't know what to do. If elderly people fall in the middle of the night, often the fire department's the first one there, maybe to pick them up out of the floor and save them an ambulance bill, or maybe to take care of them until EMS does get there. They respond at festivals, they respond at schools with education, training, and community service. At every motor vehicle crash that occurs, the firefighters are usually the first to get there to stabilize the situation for EMS and police. Traffic control, first aid, education, not only of the public, but themselves. And I think that to be competitive, we need to pay them so that they will continue to train and be in this position. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor, as a point of order, we need addresses for the folks that come forward to speak when they,
Nobody's given us one yet.
no one's given us addresses.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. Just a reminder, when you do come forward to speak, please state your name and your street address. Sorry, I didn't catch that earlier. Travis Fox?
Travis Foxwood at 278 Clark's Chapel Road. I'll be deferring my time to Scott Mullins.
Thank you. And Scott Mullins?
Scott Mullins, 748 North Fork Road. Thank you, Mayor, Town Council. Good evening, and again, my name is Scott Mullins. I'm the president of the Professional Firefighters and Paramedics of North Carolina. I just happen to live around here too, and I'm here to speak about firefighters and their pay issue. I live just on the other side of the fire protection line in Barnesville. I do my shopping, my dining, my hanging out, all this I do in Weaverville. It's close, I love it here, I love the community, I love the people, and it's where my daughter plays soccer, it's where my family goes to church. We spend the majority of our time in your town. Well, I'm not a resident of Weaverville. I recently buried a former resident, Dwayne Fender, one of my brothers, who sadly passed of occupational cancer. Dwayne was a Weaverville resident. And cancer is just one of the many hazards that your firefighters will face. We all face it. Sadly, it's not just us that face it. It's also our children, who are at a much higher risk of contracting cancer than the general public's children. It's not just us or our children, it's also our wives. Folks, this is something that impacted us. We had no idea what we were signing up for when we signed up. We knew that it was a dangerous job, and we knew that the risks were deadly for us and our brothers and sisters. We knew the hazards involved, which maybe some of you don't know. Your firefighters are also EMS providers. They're the first on scene, they're the first responders who get there a lot of times before the police officers do. We get put in some terrible situations. We have to make critical decisions under highly stressful incidents. We also fight structure fires, mitigate hazardous materials crisis. Your firefighters perform water rescues, have been on scene with them numerous times. They're some of the highest trained, most capable firefighters in Western North Carolina. They perform confined space rescues. The list goes on and on and on. I rely on your firefighters as a nearby resident and as a firefighter working for a neighboring department. We have a mutual aid with your department. You count on us and we count on you, and we know what we're getting. And what your firefighters deliver is excellent care and excellent abilities on every single job that they've ever responded to. There's some other things that you might not know. Every single city employee, at the first 3 minutes or the second?
That's time.
Oh, okay.
It was a deferral. It was a
Go ahead.
deferral from.
That was the first 2 minutes, go ahead.
Okay, I have 3 more minutes. Okay, thank you, sir. Every city, or every town of Weaverville employee makes $17.80 per hour, except your firefighters. I believe your median home value is at $420,000 right now. You're one of the wealthiest communities in the state of North Carolina. Your firefighters cannot afford to live in the town they provide excellent service to. Your firefighters are not making a living wage. Living wage is not, you don't have salaried firefighters, they're paid by the hour. That is how living wage is figured out. These folks are not making a living wage. They're not getting paid overtime either. A lot of people here and out here probably don't know that firefighters work 56 hours per week, but they don't get overtime at 40 hours like most other town employees. They work a lot of hours, and it's actually the equivalent of 364 8-hour days. So that's one day off compared to every other person. That's some serious dedication to the town. The annual salary that these folks are making, when you compare it to others, especially when we look at your median home cost, is well below the average of where it should be. Your firefighters are making significantly less than their public safety brothers and sisters at the police department also. This is not a new problem. This has been around for some time. It's not going away. Just in closing, I just want to let you know that you really do have some of the best that Western North Carolina has to offer. And I appreciate their service. I value their service, and I hope that you will value their service as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Stevie Sims.
Steve Sims, 370 Green Valley Drive. I defer my time to Jeff Tracy.
Jeff Tracy.
Jeff Tracy, I'm 2 hours southeast of here in Iron Station, North Carolina. So southwest, one of the two, I'm that way, so either way. Council, Mayor Fitzsimmons, Manager Coffey, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys. Much like everybody else here, I'm here to speak on firefighter issues and firefighter pay. I want to thank you guys for opening up the invite and extending it out to members of the Weaverville Professional Firefighter Association the past couple of weeks to kind of engage and talk to you guys. I feel like there was a little bit of misinformation out there where we assumed we're a 40-hour employee while we're working a 53 or 56-hour week. There was different stuff that was out there that, you guys may not have known and that obviously they didn't know as well. So thank you guys for that, for offering that up and taking the time. I want to kind of just speak on a few of the things that were discussed. I've watched all your YouTube videos. Thanks for broadcasting that. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm still watching YouTube, watching you guys talk. So regarding the ISO reduction in rating, ISO premiums between a 2 and an 8 doesn't affect you guys as homeowners. That's just it. Once you hit that 2, you guys are golden, right? Most of you own businesses or work in commercial occupancies within this town. That's where it affects the rating. So if you do reduce that rating down, say you're going to go to a 4 or 5 within Weaverville, that's where it's going to affect you is your business's insurance. As far as staffing reductions go, Fire Marshal Davis kind of spoke on, every member of the company having certain tasks, certain, you get more guys, they do a certain job. NIST did a study about 10 years ago, which basically said, okay, this house is on fire, you 2 people, stretch the hose, go. All right, it's pretty much ineffective. All right, you 3, let's try it, go. And it was about 25% better than the 2 people that couldn't really do it that well. Once you get up to 4 people, you're 40% faster than those 2 people. So when we're talking about seconds actually counting, seconds literally do count. There's 21 essential fireground tasks. That's between stretching a hose, forcing a door, searching for victims, cutting holes. There's a majority of, there's a lot of them, and I know, not everybody understands all the stuff that we do for our business. But the increase in staffing is what makes that an essential task. Currently, your minimum staffing is 6 people per day. 2 companies, 6 people, so you're at that 25% threshold to complete 21 tasks on 1 fireground. It's near impossible with 6 people. Luckily, we got mutual aid companies coming, and that's just going to bring you your additional staffing. Regarding the vacancies, I'll skip over the living wage, I know that was already discussed. The vacancies, currently you guys have 6, getting ready to have 7 vacancies, and that's from the top down. When you're talking about your overtime rates, the position's got to get filled somehow when you're at minimum 6 staffing per day. Overtime rates are going to go through the roof when you have that kind of reduction in staffing, and it's hard to budget when you're reduced 6 people on staffing. So I know Manager Coffey had met with some of the guys and kind of talked to them a little bit, about the proposed budget. We do support what you're proposing. We thoroughly do. We want to thank you for giving us the time with that. On the side of caution, though, increasing the minimum, you're going to slam the compression rate through the roof. You're going to have guys that have been here for 5 years that are doing a certain task that are making the same much as the guy walking the door tomorrow. And that kind of leads me to the vacancy issue as well. You don't have anybody coming in to fill in these 6 vacancies. With the current pay rate as it was, nobody's coming and knocking on the door to be a fireman. Everybody I've talked to in the Weaverville area, Black Mountain, Hendersonville, Weaverville was the place to work. Everybody applied at Weaverville unless they wanted to go be a big city fireman at Asheville. And you're not getting the applications you are now to fill those vacancies. So without bringing the starting pay up, reducing that compression rate, you're not going to get anybody to come to the door. Turnover rates of 50% right now is what I'm told. Again, I don't have that number, that's what I'm told. I want to go ahead and preface that. But the guys that you do have here, they want to be here. They don't want to go anywhere, but they still have to feed their families. They still have to be able to provide a safe place for themselves to live, for their families to live. God forbid they got to drive to work instead of walk to work, So addressing that pay and addressing those benefits is what's gonna keep your employees there. That's all I've got. I do appreciate you guys again putting it on YouTube, but most importantly, I appreciate you guys letting me come up and talk. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Scott Sherman.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nagel has
Yeah.
informed me that he cannot, he is on mute.
Uh-huh.
And he has a hand,
Right.
just,
And if you could wait on there's only one more person from the public to speak, and then I'll call you if that's okay. Okay. Scott Sherman?
Scotty Sherman, 5 Birch Crest Drive, Alexander. I was going to prefer my time to get Tracy Basin Reynolds.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. That concludes members of the public who signed up to speak on the public hearing for the budget. Councilman Nagel, do you still want to speak?
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm not there. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine, thank you.
So I think there's a lot of disinformation out there, and I appreciate everybody speaking tonight. And it's become semantics and word games. So I understand how firemen are paid, and I didn't decide how firemen are paid. And when Just Economics publishes the living wage of $17.70, they're not talking about firemen. They're talking about people who work a 40-hour week. So Just Economics living wage is $36,000 a year. Our lowest paid fireman makes $46,000 a year. Okay, and I get that because you're working 3,000 hours, which we greatly appreciate, that it slices a different way. But the bottom line is people don't pay for their milk and bread by the hour. They pay for what their income is. And so I think I don't know where it started, but I think it's done a disservice to the firemen and to the town to say that Weaverville pay their firemen $13.60 an hour, because most people multiply that by 2,080 hours. So I've been on council 7 years, and I've asked each fire chief what he thinks is the minimum wage we should pay our firemen. Okay. I didn't hear anybody tonight tell us what we should pay them. So, 1770 will be multiplied by 3,000 hours, and that's $53,000. That may be what the lowest paid fireman should be paid. I have no idea. I can only go on information I'm given. So I think we need to stop the disinformation on that, we pay our firemen $26,000 a year, because we don't. It's just wrong. I'm going to repeat it. Lowest paid fireman in 2021 was $46,000 a year. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying it's what it is. And I don't know what the firemen should be paid, but somebody smarter than me needs to tell me that. And town council, we've said this in the workshop the other day. We are happy to figure this out, but the disinformation is mind-boggling. And I do appreciate everybody's input, but the comments are acting like we're idiots and we don't know what firemen do and we don't appreciate them. I can tell you being on town council is a thankless job. I'm not risking my life like a fireman, and I appreciate firemen greatly. The second thing is you don't get a discount from a class 2 to a class 8. Called my business insurance guy, moving from a 2 to a 4, there's no discount. So, let's stop with the disinformation and stick to the facts. And the facts are we're having a hard time hiring firemen, and we may not pay enough. That easily could be a fact. So that's all I've got. And I appreciate everybody coming out tonight speaking.
Thank you, Councilman Nagel. Okay, that concludes our public hearing on the 2022-2023 budget. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. We appreciate that. And with no objection, we're going to our public hearing number 2. Public hearing number 2 this evening is regarding conditional district for a Duke Energy substation. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, before you move on to the second public hearing, it may be good, we don't see any hands raised on Zoom.
Right.
It may be beneficial to ask if anybody on Zoom wishes to give a public comment for the budget public hearing.
So if you're watching on Zoom, if you would raise your hand, which is a function on the bottom of your screen, but is there anyone on Zoom who'd like to make a comment, or Trent, do you see anyone from where you're at? Seeing none, I'm going to assume the best. Thank you. So we're going to go on to our second public hearing this evening, and this regards a conditional zoning district for a Duke Energy substation. And we've only got one person who signed up to speak on this issue, and that's Bernie Conrad.
Bernie Conrad. I live at 780 Upland Drive. My comment has to do with the location of the proposed station. We have an industrial property that's directly in front of the property that's going to be used for the substation. The location that was originally proposed to us was to put this behind the industrial property. We also own the residential property where they are now proposing to put this substation. It's within view and it's within the ability to probably hear the substation as it's running. We think that that's a mistake. We think that that will diminish the value of our property. If it would be built behind the industrial property, it's not going to affect the value of that property as long as it remains industrial property. So that's my only comment. And I would hope that they would reconsider. My understanding is, from what I've read, is that it's an environmental issue about cutting trees down, that putting it where they propose to put it now will not require as many trees being removed. But we're putting this power station in order to supply more and more homes where they're cutting trees down left and right. It just strikes me as that it's just might as well be saying it's COVID or it's environmental. Anyhow, thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, there is a representative from Duke Energy here as well as on Zoom, and the one on Zoom does have a hand up.
Okay, I can't see your name, Mr. Duke, represented on Zoom, but if you would have your hand up, go ahead and speak, please.
I'm sorry, but it's.
Oh, your hand is down, sir. Is there anyone on Zoom that I cannot see who'd like to have a comment on this public hearing? Since I think you can see the gallery, is there anyone? No, there is not. There is a
Oh, wait,
representative
yep.
here as well.
Yeah, we do have one that just popped up.
Okay. Who's that?
It is Nadine Hamby, and I've got to get her unmuted.
Ms. Hamby, you're up next. If you would unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Nadine Hamby. I live at 420 Creekside Drive. I don't have a statement as much as an ongoing question I have not been able to get answered. Duke bulldozed a path in back of 420 Creekside Drive and 424 Creekside Drive. And I have been asking why is that there? And I have not been able to get a confirmation. Tracy Muncie, who I've noticed is present tonight, did email me. She felt they were gathering field data, but I would very much appreciate finding out why that path is there. Why did you take soil samples? Are you going to let the vegetation grow back? And the biggest reason I'm asking this is because it's 25 feet from my back fence, so it's a little close. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Jason Walls is here from Duke Energy too. Would you like to address any of these issues?
I'm happy to address that question. Mayor, member of council, Jason Walls. Address is 228 Rivercrest Boulevard in Arden, North Carolina. It's a little south of here, but I represent the company across Western North Carolina. And just to address the question at the end, that path was cut in to take soil borings or to test the soil and the capability of the soils to accommodate the transmission line that'll be crossing the interstate, that we're proposing to cross the interstate, that'll ultimately tie into the substation. And to Mrs. Hamby, we continue to, the offer stands to meet with her on site to have a conversation about what we're doing, why, and how that'll be restored in the future. But the site specifically was there to collect field data to test for the soils and the stability of the soils there at that property.
Thanks, sir. Are there any other hands raised from our participants who are on Zoom this evening? Seeing none, thank you all for your comments on this issue, and I'm going to close this public hearing. And I'm going to open up public hearing number 3. Public hearing number 3 regards a code amendment on solar collectors, sidewalk waivers, and technical change. Now, I'm going to ask maybe the town attorney to give a quick explanation about that, or appropriate.
I'll take it over if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. So there are 3 proposed text amendments before you this evening. Public hearing has been duly advertised. These text amendments are related to solar collectors. Basically, we've created a set of additional standards that are applicable to solar collector systems, whether those being on roof mounted or ground mounted. Next, we have sidewalk waivers. What we're doing is expanding the criteria that the Board of Adjustment can consider in order to grant sidewalk waivers. And then lastly, our minor technical change. We just encountered a hanging reference to the Planning and Zoning Board within the section of your code of ordinances. And those are the proposed text amendments. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, James.
I should also note that these text amendments carry with them a unanimous recommendation from the planning board as well.
Good deal. No one has signed up to speak on this issue, so I assume that no one has any comments. Is there anyone on Zoom that has comments on this public hearing? Seeing none, we're going to close public hearing number 3. Thank you all for your input and your comments this evening. Greatly appreciate them. So, 3 public hearings, 40 minutes, pretty good, huh? We're going to move on to our next item, which is the approval and adjustments to tonight's agenda. Council members, you've had an opportunity to review this agenda in advance. Are there any adjustments to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as set.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, one suggestion that we, and you may have made it already, but move your report on water to ahead of the discussions on development actions.
Okay, that's so what you're suggesting, and I know you talked about this before, Jeff, excuse me, so move discussion item E to B.
Yeah, correct. Cover that first.
Okay, so moving.
I think that's good context for the other decisions.
So item E, which is update on regional water discussions, moves to the second place under discussion items ahead of other discussion items which might be affected by that report. Okay? Are there any other adjustments or changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have to do a roll call. I have to do a roll call on all these votes tonight, guys, because we have participants who are on Zoom and the state law requires us to actually go vote by vote. So excuse the time consumption. But Councilman Chase, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councilman Cordell?
Yes.
Councilman Jackson?
Aye.
Aye. Councilman Wood? Councilman McKenna?
Aye.
And Councilman Nagel?
Yes.
Thank you so much. The agenda is amended with the one item that Councilman McKenna referred to. That being said, the next item is item 6 on your agenda, the consent agenda. And Town Manager Coffey, would you go through tonight's consent agenda, please?
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Beginning on page 47, you have your consent agenda. The first item you have there is April 25th, 2022, Town Council regular meeting minutes, followed by on page 50, Saturday, May 14, and this is a special called workshop. That's the meeting minutes for that. Moving on to page 52, you have a monthly tax report showing that we are at 99.52% collected with $3,711,768. On page 57, you have a budget amendment that is all for the police department, but it does break down into alcohol education and prevention, ADC law, and law enforcement, the Pink Patch project, and then the Cops for Kids project. On page 59, you have a budget amendment for $296.02 in donations for the community center. This brings the total collected to date to $43,351 for that project. On page 61, you have the annual presentation of the manager's policies. You, every year at this time of year, delegate certain policies to my purview for approval. This policy, if you will look on page 61, really that second paragraph tells you basically what you need to see is that we have replaced the facility use policy with a new policy given the community center. And you actually see the facility use application there on page 72. But then before that, you have the rules and requirements that we have in place for the community center. On page 73, you have a request to recommendation to adopt an ordinance amending the town code. This is to eliminate the town issued fishing licenses. As you all will recall, for the last 2, maybe 3 years now, we have been receiving funds, or rather stocking of Lake Louise by the North Carolina Wildlife Commission. And so they stock it for the town at no cost to the town. What I'm recommending is that we completely eliminate the fishing license. We have put the collection of those licenses on hold for the last 2 years, but I would recommend that we completely eliminate the fishing license as part of the process. This also does take some burden off our administrative staff because, believe it or not, we have a large number of folks coming in and out of town hall to get licensed in the summertime. So this is.
You might want to mention one thing, although we won't be charging any fees, that's because the North Carolina Wildlife statute, you have to have a North Carolina fishing license.
That's correct.
That's out of our control.
That's correct. You do not have to have anything from the town of Weaverville, but if a nice officer drives by and says, do you have a license? You have to produce that license. You have to follow the same North Carolina fishing laws that anyone else does when fishing anywhere.
Did it get released?
There are some, they can keep them. That is part of the program, is that they can keep them. Most people that I've spoken with do release them, but there are some that can keep them.
I just make sure.
Absolutely.
We'll be there.
Absolutely. Page 76, you have a minor modification for Garrison Reserve. You also have the attachment, section 20-1303. These are changes to prior approved development. And this is a revised grading plan and profile. On April 22nd, the minor modification was granted for previously approved via conditional district for the project commonly known as Garrison Reserve. There's no action required, but this does require that staff notify town council of any minor modifications to conditional districts, which have been administratively approved or time to mine. So you have the background there, all the way up to page 82. And the final item on page 82 of your consent agenda is begins the agreement with Gould Killian CPA Group for the town's financial audit. We are in the second year of a 3-year contract with them. There's no increase in the price this year for the town, and we would we need your approval to execute that contract to go forward with the second year. Mr. Mayor, that is all of the consent agenda.
Thank you. And just to remind council members, every 3 years on our financial audit, we do a request proposals from different audit firms, but this is year 2 of the current 3-year contract. So it's just continuing that contract. Are there any questions of the town manager with regard to the consent agenda? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Again, we have to do a roll call vote. So, corner versus time, Councilman Nagel,
Yes.
Councilman McKenna. And we're seeing we've lost Mr. McKenna.
Yes.
Oh, no, there is. Thank you, sir. Councilman Wood. Yes, myself. Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Ms. Cordell.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Manager Coffey, would you now give us your town manager's report?
Yes, sir. Thank you again. Just a reminder that Citizens Academy is ramping back up in June, on June 9th. As a matter of fact, we do have a great number of applications, and I'm going to accept applications right up until the day of the first academy, because I want to give enough folks enough time to join us. We do have, I want to say, probably 18 applications at this point, which is a really good number for us. But we have the capacity to easily take probably 25 or maybe more. So we look forward to that. And that process will start in June and go through December. We do have a special called workshop that the mayor is setting and has directed that we schedule that workshop for Monday, June 20th at 6 o'clock. And that is for two purposes. One is to discuss the bike path plan from our representatives from traffic planning and design. And then the second portion of that, the second hour of that workshop, it would be for the purpose of discussing water. Do want to call attention to Memorial Day, which is quickly approaching. And we will be having a program for Memorial Day on Monday the 30th at 11 a.m. at Lake Louise Park. We would encourage town council and anyone from the public to attend and join us there. Want to regretfully to share with you, as you all know, our Chief Williams is leaving us to go on to new endeavors. And we will be having a reception for him on the 31st, Tuesday the 31st, beginning at 3 o'clock, and we have 3 to 5, but we can stay there as long as we need to. I won't get into a whole lot more to say about Chief Williams at this point, because he has been a true leader, and for me, he's been a very good friend. And so I personally will miss him and thank him for what he's done for the town of Riverville, but I'm also very supportive of his future. In relation to that, I do want to have announced today that I have appointed our police chief, Ron Davis, as the interim fire chief for the department. And I believe that he will serve he'll have a tall order to maintain Chief Williams, but I think he'll do a fantastic job. We continue to need leadership. I believe strongly that Chief Davis can provide that leadership in the interim while we're accepting applications for a permanent fire chief.
Thank you very much. Chief Williams, we will look forward to seeing you on the 31st at your soiree here. But I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly recognize you for your outstanding service to this town and for the past several years, and let you know how much we really greatly appreciate your time here, and good luck in the future, sir. So this, we're gonna go on to general public comments, and, you can talk just about anything you want during this session. This is different than the public hearings that we had earlier on in the meetings. Again, we, will not necessarily answer any questions you have. We're not going to be taking action on the budget items tonight. We're still in the midst of the budget creation process. And to remind you again, we do have a town workshop on June 21st. And hopefully we can finalize items on the budget at that meeting. So having said that, Gail Solomon Canty. And Gail, I guess you would please state your name and your address when you come forward.
My name is Gail Solomon County. I live at 23 Red Maple Drive, Weaverville. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to spread the word about a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to support not just Weaverville, but our local artists and preservation of our very own gorgeous landmark at Lake Louise, the Water Wheel. I don't know how many of you are aware of an organization called Preservation Through Art. It's founded by a local artist, Doc Barn, with the purpose of raising awareness about the need for conservation of beautiful landmarks all around the country, but he started with the French Broad River Basin. And what he did was organize a group of, probably 20 or more local artists to go slogging through the mud with him, literally. He went by foot, on horseback, and on kayak to revisit places that were memorialized by a painter in the 1800s. That painter published a book called Preserving Picturesque America. Scott's mission is to recreate these scenes today as they are today, with an eye towards raising money to help conserve them so that your children and your children's children can enjoy them as much as you. I doubt that there's anyone in this room who has not at some point stopped to admire the water wheel at Lake Louise. I also have stopped to admire the beautiful new community center, the Dottie Chevelle Community Center. Now, that community center deserves a beautiful painting of the water wheel, which happens to be available on auction at the Chief Benefit and Fundraiser for PAPA, which is the name of the organization. The fundraiser is being held at Brunk Auctions, and this painting is on auction. And if somebody else gets it before you guys claim it and the gavel goes down, I don't think I will ever forgive you. And so I have brought information with me about the organization, the auction. There are 15 jury paintings by local artists. 50% of the proceeds raised at the auction go to the artists. 50% go to about 10 local conservation groups, including River Link, Chimney Rock, Carolina. I have them all listed here, but I can't see them because I didn't put my glasses on. Anyway, I do have some literature, and with your permission, I'd like to leave it on the side so that anyone who is interested can pick up a copy as they leave. But please, don't let this opportunity go by. The walls of that community center are screaming for a picture of that water wheel, and it is gorgeous. So at least come down and look, have a good time. There'll be refreshments, hors d'oeuvres, chance to meet the artists, and basically have a nice time out after everything we've all gone through with COVID. So I hope you'll join me and the artist and Doc Barn for this occasion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Please leave the information over there. I'm sure people will be interested in that. Brenda Edwards.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. In 2006, I had a severe car accident where a young person pulled up in front of me, fractured my right ankle severely, which is now fused solid. I want to talk about our firefighters because, excuse me, it wasn't EMS who first responded to my ankle and my accident. It was the fire department. These guys took me out of the car and into an ambulance before EMS ever got there.
Is this feedback that she's not standing in front of the microphone?
Maybe.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There it is.
I didn't want to be too loud. My son is a third generation firefighter and he started in Weaverville. Several years ago, he left and went to West Buncombe because the pay was about 30% higher than it was in Weaverville. I'm just here to say our firefighters deserve to be paid as good as all the other stations in this county and in the surrounding counties. And I strongly urge you to please reconsider increasing their pay so that you can not have 6 or 8 openings and so that you can have firefighters. If you ended up going to a volunteer fire department, you wouldn't have people to answer our calls. And like he said previously, the gentleman before me, Weaverville is one of the highest values in property in the county. And we don't want to have an accident and be stuck on the interstate waiting on a volunteer firefighter to come there. Because it's not just EMS that responds, it's your first responders who are firemen. And I'm asking something that I'm not sure if anybody else is concerned about, but are we really sure, and I'm saying in this most respect that I can have, that a police chief can also serve as a fire chief? I mean, does he have the qualifications to be a fire chief? Why would you not use a fireman, a fire captain, or a lieutenant? I'm saying that with much respect that I can. We need our firemen. We don't need them to go to other stations. My son still lives in Weaverville and drives to West Buncombe because he's now assistant chief. And I think that we need to consider their income a lot more.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Tom Balistreri?
I didn't get the lady's first name.
Her name was Brenda Edwards, 29 Sheriff.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Tom Balistreri. I live at 26 Whitetail Drive. Mr. Mayor, council, and staff, always a pleasure to be back here and address you. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Weaverville Center for Creative and Healthy Living, where I serve as board chairperson. Since October 1st, October 2021, our not-for-profit organization has been able to bring on average 20 to...
I don't mean to interrupt you. What we have on the agenda is just that there's your public comment. You may not be down on the agenda at item number, item F.
I'm sorry. I thought I was...
We look forward to hearing in a few minutes, sir.
Okay. I was just so
I
excited.
didn't want to take a repeat. Well, thank you. You got to start now.
All right.
Thank you. Are there any public comments from members who are watching on Zoom or from the public watching on Zoom? No. Okay. Good job. If that's the case, then we will proceed on to item 9, discussion and advertising. The first item up, item A, is a conditional district for a Duke Energy substation. And Attorney Jackson, would you fill us in, please?
I'll be happy to, and then I'm gonna, with your permission, turn this over to Mr. Eller to fill in some gaps for us. This is a conditional district that you're considering. You've now, you've had a favorable recommendation from the planning board. You've held a public hearing, at which point you had a couple of folks that spoke. Duke Energy is here, and I'm sure happy to answer any questions that council may have. One issue that we do need to resolve is that Councilmember Nagel is an adjoining property owner. And so I'm not sure what his position is on whether he believes it to be a conflict of interest, but that is something that we need to check and see whether Duke Energy does have an objection to Councilmember Nagel participating in the vote. And if so, it would be appropriate for town council to consider whether to allow that or excuse him from the vote.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nagel has given me another note that he is muted, so can we switch back to the view of having him there?
Hey, Mayor and Jennifer, I know we've had this discussion on numerous occasions. I don't necessarily agree that it's a conflict of interest, but I've decided to recuse myself from the vote. I still may ask some questions, but I will not be voting on the matter.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Councilman. And yeah, is there more, Attorney Jackson?
I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Eller, and then possibly Duke Energy and their folks.
So this was originally before council on the night of March 28th. I'll be brief, just a reminder for those who maybe weren't in attendance then. This is a 33.75 acre tract in Hickory Lane. It also abuts Aiken Road, just adjacent to future I-26. As Jennifer noted a moment ago, this project carries with it a favorable recommendation from your planning board. It concluded their deliberations on April 5th. And community meeting was held as made requisite by conditional districts by the developer. And I would ask that the mayor recognize them so they can speak to the content of the community meeting as well. And then lastly, as was already noted during the public hearing, was duly advertised in accordance with North Carolina law and town ordinances. That's all I have to add, and I just would ask that we recognize our folks from Duke Energy.
And Jennifer, you have something?
As they're coming, I'm not sure whether that is gonna come via Zoom or whether we're gonna have somebody, we've got somebody in-house. While he's coming to the podium, I will remind town council that the action that you'll be considering tonight is the adoption of an ordinance which establishes this conditional district. Of particular interest will be the conditions of the zoning, and nothing, the law prohibits you from entering an ordinance of this fashion without the consent of those conditions by the applicant, which is Duke Energy. So it would be appropriate to make sure that they're comfortable with.
Councilman Nagel also has his hand raised.
Okay. I'll get back to you in just a moment, Andrew. Mr. Walls.
Mayor, members of council, staff, thank you again for having us here tonight. My name is Jason Walls. I'm the regional director for government and community relations with Duke Energy. Just a quick point of introduction. With me in the room tonight is Pamela Oakley-List. If she could raise her hand as our lead for public engagement, available to our neighbors throughout this project for questions, comments, concerns, as well as our project manager, Lee Butler. Also has Lee to raise her hand. James Shepard, who is our design engineering consultant, and James will be tag teaming with me tonight for some of the technical information that we'll share very quickly to get to questions and deliberations. And his associate Anna is also joining us as a new member of the HDR team, but eager to learn, listen, and be part of the process as well. So real quickly, we'll go through a presentation for you that just outlines the need for the project. I don't think that I have to say this to the people in this room, but Weaverville is a growing community. It's an attractive place to be, to relocate to, and we're seeing significant growth in commercial, residential, and even industrial loads. And so this project is needed. It's a project that will allow to support the growth of this community, as well as help us catch up in some of the capacity and reliability challenges that we have faced in this community. And so the site itself, or what is being proposed, is this working? I can't see it.
We're still seeing your first slide.
Wait for it. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. Project description. So the project description is just that. It's a substation. The substation's a 115 kilovolt substation, which for a non-engineer doesn't mean a lot. It's not the largest substation that we build, nor is it the smallest, but it's a substation that is sized to support the growth and development that you have seen, as well as it was being built and designed to accommodate future growth, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation of having to find another piece of land to run transmission lines and other things to support the community. It will be built on approximately 33 acres of property on the property that Duke Energy purchased off of Aiken Road You know where it is. It's right across from the entrance of Thermo Fisher. It's the property that's behind AV Emblem. And as someone mentioned, it is adjacent to Councilmember Gable's home. And for the record, Duke Energy does not object to his participation in this process at all. Not only is he as a council member, we recognize him as a neighbor and an important voice in the process. So we don't have any objection to his participation at all. One of the benefits of this site, before we jump to where it is, if you go to the next site, is that it's in really close proximity to transmission lines. One of the challenges when the company is building electric substations is that it's not just the substation and the wires that come out of the substation to serve the community. It's also the electricity that needs to go into the substation in order to fuel your community and provide those electrons through the conductors, if you will, to the homes and businesses in Weaverville. This site is well positioned directly across I-26 from the transmission line in which the company would, what we call, tap into, is that main source of electricity that would come into the substation, and then feeders or lines would come out of that substation to serve specific parts of your community. I must apologize to those. I think Councilmember McKenna is one of those who may be without electricity because of a tree that fell from outside of the right of way at Lake Louise Park. And this substation, the ironic part about it, would serve many of those customers of which were without electricity today. That was not planned, that was Mother Nature. But it was kind of ironic that as I got a phone call this afternoon, we'd be talking about a substation in that area.
I believe it's on Councilman Nagel's property.
That's not funny. But anyway, we'll move on. And so I would like to invite to the podium, my coworker and colleague, James Shepard, to talk a little bit about the site plan. And then both of us are here to answer your questions or direct questions to some of our teammates on Zoom. I wasn't about to introduce them because I can't see them and I actually don't know who all is on. So it'll be a little bit of a surprise to me as we get to the question part of the council meeting. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the substation and what Jason was talking about from a technical standpoint. So one of the first things I wanted to mention is that when we came here for the planning commission meeting that we did, one of the comments specifically was to increase the buffer from 20 feet to 30 feet. We have gone back and redesigned the site to accommodate for that. We kept it as an undisturbed buffer as well to maintain the tree canopy that already exists in that location. And one of the things that I do want to talk about just in generalities from the site, whether you guys can see the screen up there. And one of the challenges with this site that we've really been working very hard to overcome is there's a 200-foot vertical difference between the road and the back of the property. So as a result of that, there's only so many ways to build things into that, and you end up cutting into a hill. And so we've worked diligently to look at this site. We've gone through many iterations of how to locate this in grading plans. I think this might be the most designed site that I've ever done in my 23-year career. And we've worked very diligently to accommodate that. So the other things that I do want to mention on this site are that we are, as mentioned earlier, trying to maintain a tree canopy as much as we can between all the neighbors and minimize the grading. That's not only from an environmental standpoint, but it's also from a constructability standpoint, making sure that we don't have excessive haul off on the site. And other items to that. So the other thing that I would like to bring up is that we, based on all of the information, all of the items, we're intending to meet all applicable ordinances from the city and on the town of Weaverville, and we're also pursuing a stormwater permit through Buncombe County. So that said, if there are any additional items or questions, we'll take those.
Does anyone have any questions for our Duke representative? Anyone on Zoom?
Yeah, I still have a question, Patrick, when you're ready.
Oh, we're ready. Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't know if this question has been answered. It was asked. It has to do with the value, the property and tax value for the town of Weaverville. And I understand that the North Carolina Utilities Commissions does all that, but still interested in what Duke is what the town's gonna see from Duke for property tax value of this site. Because I know what we're losing, but I don't know what we're gaining. and I'll go over with what we're losing after I hear what we're gaining.
Town staff, we might go answer the question.
Let me start, and then I'm gonna ask Mr. Wallace to fill in a bit. So the big question is whether the town gets property tax on this property. Because when you look at similar utilities, you see a zero value. And what the zero value means is that the counties are not authorized to value it because it's considered a system, a public service system across the state. And so what they do is they give that to the Department of Revenue in order to come out, calculate the value of this, the part of the system that is going to be within the town. And so they actually have a value. And so we do get taxes, property taxes on it. Tanya, when you, the finance officer, when you see your reporting, there's a separate tax item for those taxes. Now, as far as a specific value is concerned, that's I don't know that any staff person could say that until the Department of Revenue calculates the value. But right now, it is purely a property tax. It is a land holding that does have a value. It is being taxed right now. It would not switch out of that until they're ready to turn the system on. And Mr. Wallace may have some idea of what he thinks the ultimate value might be of this, but other than that, it would be a miss on my part.
Ms. Jackson.
Yeah. Jason, real quick, I don't expect staff, Jennifer, expect staff to know it. It's similar. I think we were told it's going to be similar in size to the one on Lake Julian. So that's I know until they tell us what this particular one's going to be, but there should be some point of reference from another facility in the area.
So, Mayor, Ms. Jackson, Mr. Nagel, yes, we do have that information. It's taken a little bit of time to run it down because I didn't realize it was a strange request when I was asking our tax department, but apparently it was. And so they were explaining to me that the way that would be based is you would take the cumulative Buncombe County and Town of Weaverville tax rate, and you would multiply that by essentially the cost of the project. So how much the project is worth to build. And this station it's about $16.4 million is the estimate to build. And you know, our project manager is here who can speak to the numbers if you have any of those questions. And so when you do the math, and just for the record, I did not do the math because I'm not a math person, but I had the math done, and it's approximately about $56,000 a year would be the tax. I'll call it a tax payment if that's how you refer to it on an annual basis, based on the 2021 Buncombe County Weaverville Town cumulative tax rate.
Thank you, sir.
Is that for both the county and the town, Jason, or just the town?
That's the cumulative. So I think if I remember the number, the Buncombe County's number is about $1,900 per million of value. So I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but that's the cumulative, Mr. Nagel.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep. Other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I appreciate your team getting that together. So I just want council and, planning and zoning has already given their opinion. So it's zoned R8 and there's 33 acres. So I guess there could be 200 and whatever apartments on there, right? 8 times 33, 264 apartments. And if we said you put 4 per acre instead of 8 per acre of homes, you say 33 times 4, 132 homes. Average home, I think one of the firemen just said tonight, $400,000. So $53 million divided by 100 times 0.35 is the current tax rate. So it's 185,000 if I did my math right. So just again, don't have an opinion on it. Just saying, okay, we're going to get a third of the 56 based on, I think Buncombe County is taxes are twice as high as ours. So we'll get 10 grand or something like that. And we're giving up $185,000 in potential revenue if it was actually developed by a developer. So that's that, and just numbers. Second thing, and then I will stop speaking, is want everybody to understand the size. So we did not make a field trip, unfortunately, out to see the one at Lake Julian, but it is, I think I reiterated this or said this in a previous meeting. I think it's four times larger than the one next to Steak and Shake and next to Lowe's. So it's big. As Jason said, it's not their biggest, it's not their smallest, but it's 4 times larger than the one at Lowe's and Steak and Shake. So it is a big commercial endeavor in the middle of a residential district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilman Nagel. Mr. Elder, do you have something?
I'd like to add that every year as a part of the calculation for infill development, Dale and I sit down and make a best estimate as to what those numbers should be, so council can continue to reserve water for those properties that are already in town. A few years back, we created a document called Underutilized Parcels of Size Within Municipal Borders. This property just so happened to be the largest parcel of that, and with R3 zoning at a theoretical maximum of 8 units per acre, this property would support 270 units. Another way of looking at this would be that effectively 270 units would be injected back into the system for future water availability.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Walls or anyone else? Or council members? Yes. Ms. Cordell?
How long y'all own this property? You?
I think we closed on it in 2017. 2018, 2017, 2018. I have to go back. I don't remember the exact date, sir.
Was this on the market for sale at that time? Or?
I'm sorry, sir. I can't answer if it was on the market or not. We purchased it from, actually one of another adjoining property owners.
Well, the reason for asking the question is, I was wondering if my son developer had built in there before, if it was that attractive for housing.
Mr. Jackson, I can't speak to why somebody didn't do something before. I do understand that there was a development plan at one point that someone decided not to pursue. That's the extent of knowledge I have on the property.
But when you bought it 5 years ago, you knew you would be going through a public hearing and vote and so forth.
Yes, sir.
Process.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Cordell?
So Jason, we talked a couple times on the phone. I found a sample place that is this size. And so I walked all around the gates and I didn't hear anything, which made me happy. It is huge, but if the trees stay around it, most people are not going to see it. However, with that being said, everybody likes to have a win-win situation. And, it would be so much better. The only people that are actually going to feel detrimental in this is the Conrads and the Nagels, because it does butt right up against their property. And there is 33 acres. And so, of course, if you look at it from just putting the square and round pegs and things like that, you ask yourself the question, if you could just move it a little bit farther this way, and I know you're talking about 200 feet, and I haven't walked the property. I drove up there and I thought there might be snakes, and so I didn't walk the property. So I understand the need for the substation. I understand how it's going to service the area and that we continue to grow. I don't think that it's in a horrible location, other than it's right up against that one private family home. So with that being said, is there any way to move it a little farther away from their property?
So, Ms. Cordell, I'm going to ask James Shepard to join me up here, because we have looked at that site in a lot of different ways. And I'm not sure if it's part of the slide deck that we can show. I'm not sure we were anticipating members on Zoom, so hopefully it will be. But we have looked at that, and there are trade-offs. There are trade-offs with additional tree clearing and retaining walls, and moving it, and the topography makes it a challenge, just to be quite frank. And so James and his team have done really an incredible job of looking at it from all the different sides. And I'll be the first to tell you that, yes, it will have a visual impact on Mr. Nagel and Mr. Conrad's property. in the company and thinking about the mitigation for that, we are happy to work with those property owners on their property to plant some vegetative screening on their property. On the 30-foot buffer that'll stay as is, then some additional screening on their property at the company's cost will hopefully help address some of the visual mitigation that I recognize will exist when the substation is built. But we were also managing a large neighborhood to the south, also trying to figure out ways to maintain as much vegetation on the property as possible, reduce the height of retaining walls, and really take advantage of some of that topography to build that station in a way that we can build it low enough to where the neighbor to the south will see right over the top of it. And I don't think they'll ever see it, except for Mrs. Hamby, who did talk about where her property is located and where the line will come across the interstate. There will need to be a right of way that's cleared there, but the station itself will be lower, considerably lower than the neighborhood above. And so I'm going to ask James to cover some of those options and some of those other alternatives that the company looked at proactively, recognizing that we were trying to minimize impacts to all property owners around the property.
So this site is uniquely challenging, and the fact that there are 3 drainage swales that actually come from the top of the hill, which is the neighboring property to the south, and they sort of circumvent different ways to the site. So that said, plus, like, as I mentioned earlier, the 200-foot difference in topo from the front to the back. So we've looked at, I'm not sure. Really hard button. Sure wasn't, but we've looked at that, and so I guess what I would say is we actually started with this design in the very rear. Wait a minute.
We're not moving it, just.
Okay. So we started with this property in the rear of the, started with design this in the rear. And what we ran into was sort of the challenge of being able to develop a drive access that makes sense for building a substation. And then be able to work that. So when we did that, what ended up happening is we ended up this long curvy road that required these really high 2-to-1 fill slopes to tie in down to the grade, and we ended up clearing almost every tree on the property. All the way to the neighbor's property, all the way to neighbors on east and west, just to fit it in there. Then we struggled with the stormwater aspect of it. And what that means is that as we're designing this, we're required to meet the stormwater requirements for detention. Because we have 3 different drainage areas going through the site, we had to work around those to find a way to fit the pad in so that we didn't have water running through the pad, design ditches around that, and end up in our sediment basin in the low point of the site so that we could make all the water work and the calculations work. So we've looked at this on multiple levels in many ways. We're trying to balance the need for cut. We were at one point over 300,000 cubic yards of haul off, which is an immense amount of dirt to try to move. So we've been looking at this site and where we could do it. We actually also we cut cross sections and looked at the different neighboring properties to see elevations. And where we came up with is that ultimately it does seem like it would make sense to move this farther back and be less visible. And we thought the same thing until we started doing the work. And as you move this substation farther back on the property, it gets much higher in elevation from the road. And then what ends up happening is you basically get a view from Macon Road to where this thing sits up on a hill, kind of like a pitcher's mound with a big retaining wall right behind it. And then all the trees in the front get cut because we have to deal with the drainage issues, the storm drainage, and the fill slopes for the road. So when we looked at this, we looked at all of these things, and we actually started this project with Duke Energy. We partnered with them. We went back and started at the very beginning and started reevaluating the site for a period of months, trying to find the best solution. And we have worked diligently since the planning commission meeting to meet the 30-foot buffer. We've redesigned the site to accommodate for that. It has been a challenge because of the topographic constraints and the water constraints on the site. And we really do feel like, I know intuitively it seems like we should put this somewhere else on the site, but this is really going to be from the neighboring properties the least impact from review. It's a little counterintuitive, but we had gone under a lot of work to try to make sure that we're taking all those items into account. And if we start moving this, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to accommodate that 30-foot buffer because of the road and the fill that we have to bring to the front of the site, and not to mention the additional work that would have to be done to clear some of this, to clear additional areas on the property.
What were some of the other concerns that came up during the community meeting on May 5th?
The community meeting, so, I think Ms. Hamby, do you want to speak to that? Or? The community meeting? I was there, but, I mean, Ms. Hamby, spoke a little bit, about her concern about what was going on behind her property. Some of the other concerns we're talking about, exactly what we're talking about now, where this is located, how we got to that decision, for those aspects of the site. I believe there were 2 or 4 attendees that came. The meeting lasted about an hour. And so we just generally took 7 attendees. Okay, thank you. We talked through the site exactly what we talked about here. And really, I think, understanding how the transmission line was going to come into the property as well as the location of this. So those are the main topics that we discussed through. Duke Energy led that meeting. They would have more detail on that. I did participate in the meeting. I have those notes in front of me, but if you need additional detail, we can provide.
The vice mayor has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna run down, and thank you for kind of pulling up the quick hit kind of notes on that. So the issues that were raised were other locations in Weaverville. Where were some of the other locations? There were some that were directly on Merriman Avenue. Of course, that would lead for transmission lines down Aiken Road and through town. And this specific site that was identified did not rate well in that process. Impacts the neighbors from light and noise. There'll be minimal light. There'll be minimal light. We had someone there speak to noise issues. I think Ms. Cordell mentioned that she visited our station in South Asheville and was able to experience kind of what that sounds like in her remarks. Vegetation impacts near Creekside Drive. Again, Ms. Hamby mentioned that this evening in the public meeting. Factors considered in the site selection. Again, our ability to maintain trees on the site played a role. Benefits of the substation to the Knoll Ridge neighborhood. Location, placement of substation on the property tax value, which we, after a couple of attempts inside of the company, I think we've answered. The size of the substation, the average, and we were able to kind of direct council members who wanted to take a field trip to the substation that would be of equivalent size to what we're proposing here to visit that on their own time. Distance between the substation and Creekside Drive, how many employees will be working at the site regularly after construction, which is very few. They would be there for inspections and if issues arise and things of that nature. The number of attendees at the community meeting, somebody asked that question, and as well any effects on wildlife that live on the property. And that was kind of a rundown of the questions and comments that were asked.
Thank you. Just a minute, we've already taken public comment, but if the representative Duke would want to ask you a question, I'll ask them to do so with that.
To the pleasure.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, Jason, one other question I had, and I was on one of those public comment calls. At one point, there was some conversation around recreational opportunities on the unused part of your land, mountain biking or hiking. Is it feasible to do it there, or is that something that's still in play?
Councilmember McKenna, and I'll say what I've said to that is my answer. We don't know until it's really the site is complete, it's developed, and we are happy that once that is complete, to sit back down with the town and see what is available, or if there is some type of public benefit or public recreational opportunity that exists. And when we look at it from, I keep looking over here because he's in my corner. We look at it in terms of utility property, and so we don't necessarily see the recreation potential because of the steep slopes immediately off of like Hickory Lane. But then again, none of us are recreation planners either. And so we are happy to talk with the town once the project is built on what if any opportunities exist for public benefit and public recreation.
We appreciate your being receptive to that, because you do have a piece of property that's 33 acres and you're only going to build on what, 3 of them, so.
That's right, and we have, and again, every property is different. Can say that with an absolute straight face, but there are a lot of examples here in the region where we have worked with municipalities or county governments on properties that the company owns that are properties that would be suitable for public recreation and worked on arrangements to facilitate that. But it's just hard to do that with a bare piece of property without really understanding or really knowing what the site will look like once construction is finished.
Thank you. Mr. Conrad, do you have a question? Well, make a comment. If you come to the microphone, please.
When this all started, we had conversations with Energy, and we offered, was asked actually, and then we agreed and offered to give them a right of way across our property, which would be the property that Conrad Industries or ABM and General Equipment are on, to give them easy access to a location behind an industrial piece of property. And last meeting that we had was on the property, and we were up in that area. And then we were surprised later on when we found it was being located down further next to property that I own that's residential and is something that's could be developed, and next to my son-in-law, Andrews, again, within sight, and diminishing the value of his property and diminishing the value of our property. So that's all I wanted to get the record straight, that this didn't start at that point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there anyone else on Zoom who has their hand raised?
Not at the moment.
Are there any other questions or aside from members of the council? No? Attorney Jackson?
Just wanted to confirm that Duke Energy is willing to consent to the conditions as proposed by the planning board, which are included in the ordinance that is before town council.
Yes. If there are no other questions, is there a motion to take action on this item? I would motion that we approve the conditional request for Duke Energy Station. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Douglas. We'll take a roll call vote, which is the norm this evening.
Before we proceed on that, there, just to restate that motion just a little bit, and that's to adopt the ordinance establishing the conditional district designated as conditional CD6 for the Duke Energy substation on Aiken Road as presented. And it would be appropriate, if that's the motion, it would be appropriate to ask for any discussion on that before you proceed vote.
Thank you, ma'am. That is the motion. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to the vote. Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Councilman Cordell?
Yes.
Councilman Jackson?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Councilman Wood?
Yes.
Councilman McKenna?
Yes.
And Councilman Nagel. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Nagel has recused himself, excuse me. Motion passes, 6-0, thank you. There's a map over there. The next item is, I'm up next. We've moved to item E, which is update on regional water discussions, up to the second item, which is discussion and action items. So we can see with that. For those of you who've been paying attention, town council has been discussing the future of water capacity for Weaverville now for a couple of years. We currently are about approximately 60% of our current capacity. And we decide we need to look forward because solutions to these kind of problems are often a multi-year project. So we've been looking at everything from expanding our current water plant to other options. A couple months ago, by the Water Systems Committee of Town Council, directed myself and the manager to meet with a series of stakeholders, including other governments in the area and other organizations, about this issue to try and discover what our options were and if there were any collaborative or cooperative arrangements to be made with others, because we recognize it's not just a problem that the town of Weaverville has, but that both of the Cumberland and North Cumberland and Madison counties, many of us are looking at the same problems. We have now concluded all but one of those meetings. We still have one to go, but we wanted to report back to you tonight. So I've reported to you earlier about many of the meetings we had. Tonight, I'd like to present you with a series of recommendations for town council to consider as they develop a course of action for the future of water in Weaverville. I'd say that in creating these recommendations, I considered conservation, diversification, and expansion all as opportunities to increase water capacity in the town of Weaverville in coming years. As town manager Coffey mentioned earlier, we will shoot to have a information session, if you will. I mean, this is a very complicated issue, and I know I've got lots of questions from the public, so we'll have an information session to try and educate the public more on the details on Monday, June 20th in this facility at 7 p.m. approximately. My recommendations to town council would be these. We need to develop a more aggressive tiered pricing system for water. Right now, the first 3,000 gallons of water, which is about the average, is what the average family uses in a month's time. We sell to about $9.22 per gallon. After you pass that, the next 20-some thousand gallons only goes up 9 cents. It is not really noticeable at all. Probably the best thing we can do to reduce water usage is to do conservation measures. And having a more aggressive tiered pricing system is a common practice around the country. And I suggest to council that we develop a more aggressive tiered pricing system. I've made an example recommendation here. One that says after the first 3,000 gallons a month, instead of like going up 9 cents, we go up 50% and then another 50% at 10,000 gallons. To give you an example of how that plays out, right now, the average user would pay $48 per month for that water, and this new system would pay only $55. So for the average family, there'd be no effect at all. For those large users or those users who aren't paying attention to conservation, they have to pay a little extra for misusing water. This is something we could do right away. We could implement this at the new fiscal year in July. Recommendation number 2. Apply for state funds in conjunction with the town of Marshall. As I mentioned before, Marshall is looking for a water solutions well. They are all on wells right now. Some of the wells are contaminated. They have funds to connect a line from their town to Mars Hill, and they are currently doing engineering studies to figure that out. They expect those studies to be done by July. Excuse me. Just to keep you for the United on, we will have a line that connects to Mars Hill. Mars Hill is willing to work with us if we could work it out to provide extra water to Marshall. Mars Hill is willing to do that as well, but Mars Hill has very limited capacity compared to what we would have. So this would be an opportunity to work with Marshall to make sure that their water supply is safer and more abundant. As it turns out, right now, the state has a large amount of American Rescue Plan monies. And General Assembly goes back into session this week, in which I wish our timing was different. If we could have a proposal that would involve multi-jurisdictions, which would be an attractive proposal to our General Assembly. But we're not quite ready yet. We have to wait at least until the engineering starts to get done by Marshall. However, it is planned that there be a second round of funding in the fall. And my recommendation is that we continue to work with Mars Hill and develop a multi-jurisdictional proposal to submit to our state legislators in the fall in the hopes of getting funding to pay for at least some of the expansion of our water plant, which we intend to provide water to Marshall. Number 3, retrofit our water line connection to Mars Hill. As we talked about before, we have a line that goes to Mars Hill, but the water only flows one way. I had an opportunity to speak with Dale Pennell, our public works director, and Trent Duncan, our water plant supervisor, recently about this, and as it turns out, correcting this is actually a fairly simple measure. Luckily, we're downhill from Mars Hill, so I think solving that problem is not as big as we may have thought it was at one time. That is something we should probably be able to accomplish by the end of this year, I would think. Next, connect our system to the Woodfin water system. Woodfin water literally has lines that run parallel to ours and someplace cross over ours. And now Woodfin, it turns out, is actually at they're at capacity of their water plant. They are currently buying supplemental water from Asheville. But in terms of having a diversified system where we're connected to the town right next door to us, for emergency, times of emergency, or in times of supplemental water. It would be certainly a beneficial thing to have. And as it turns out, the Public Works Director told me he's done some research this week and found that in fact we had a connection in the past which could somewhat easily be reconnected. Next would be to negotiate extra water supply from Asheville. As I mentioned, Woodford is already doing this. We do have a water line that connects to Asheville. And we have asked for a meeting with Asheville. We have not had that meeting yet to find out what we can negotiate with them in terms of quantity of water we can receive our quantity of water we can receive and what that price might be. Obviously, there are some benefits to being able to utilize that line that's already in place, either in times of emergency or in times that we need supplemental water supplies for our systems. And also, just the more diversification we have in the systems is great, and this one would be fairly easy to accomplish since we already have a line going there, and we're awaiting the meeting with actual water systems to see what those details might be. And last would be that we expand our treatment plant here in Weaverville, as we discussed before, doubling the size of that facility. I would hope that we can find out in the fall if we can get some funding for this, because as you know, it's a very expensive project. So I think I would recommend that our first option be to see if we can get some state funding to pay for that expansion. If it turns out though that that doesn't work out, we cannot get that funding, then we probably need to go ahead and expand our water plant, because we know it's a multi-year and very expensive undertaking. So I submit these recommendations to council tonight. We're not going to take action on this tonight, but I encourage you to review them. I have made them available to you all a little earlier to review them, and we'll have opportunity to discuss them and any ideas, and we will have ideas about them at our meeting on June 20th, and also subsequently. But I do hope that after completing the one last meeting we have with the Asheville Water System and our public meeting, the town council will feel prepared to take to chart a course of action to ensure Weaverville's water capacity for the future. So thank you for the opportunity. I can tell you that I learned more about the water systems in our region than I ever thought I needed to know. And I consider myself kind of a water expert in this area at this point. So please review those recommendations, and we'll be talking more about them later. Having said all of that, we're going to move on to our next item, item B, which I guess technically is item C now, which is the Ollie Weaver Road project. And Attorney Jackson, would you catch us up to speed on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the town is now in receipt of new applications concerning the Ollie Weaver Road project. These are three parcels, one owned by Weaver Vegas LLC and the other two owned by the Schultz. I'm probably mispronouncing that. But they have now submitted a new water application that reduces their water request down to essentially 202 units. And R3 zoning request, as opposed to the previously applied for R12 zoning that was voted down. The new water commitment application has been reviewed by the Public Works Director, who has found that there is sufficient capacity within the town's water system to accommodate the request without any adverse effects. The town manager recommends that the town council approve this new water request conditioned upon annexation of the properties into the town's municipal limits. So that's the action before you on the water request. On the new zoning request, which is R3, this does take the density down from 12 units per acre down to 8. So it does reduce the maximum number of units on that property to 202. Because town council did in your previous meeting deny the R12 zoning request, I would note that you do have a code provision that prevents or that provides a waiting period for another zoning request on this, but that is waivable by town council. It does require, we do have all 7, so it does require 6 out of the 7 of you in order to consider that new zoning request prior to the lapse of 1 year. So that's something that should be considered before going forward with it. If you were to waive that, an action to send this to the planning board for review and recommendation, and perhaps going ahead and setting a public hearing for your June meeting would also be appropriate. One last thing, town manager and I both recommend that you hold action on your the annexation petition that is pending. You have not taken any action on that, had your public hearing, it's now just pending. We do recommend that you hold that action until you've resolved the zoning.
Okay, thank you. So just to make sure, so do we need to have separate votes, one to waive the rule to wait, and also a second vote if we would approve the water project, and then with the water allocation would be contingent on the annexation coming after planning board, the planning board has an opportunity to review the new application for R3 zoning. Did I get that correct?
Correct. I think there are in essence three separate votes. One on the water, one to waive the waiting period on the zoning, and then the third one would be to refer the R3 zoning to the planning board and to go ahead and set the public hearing. Normally, you don't have to do that tonight, but since the planning board did submit a favorable recommendation to you on a higher density development, I don't think that the planning board is going to need more than one meeting to come up with a recommendation on this. So you could go ahead and set the public hearing for June 27th at 6.
So, does everyone understand what our questions at this point about what was before this evening?
I have questions about the water, the application for commitment letter here. On page 112 here in our packet, it says that they're considering 18 buildings totaling 2 residential units. On the concept plan, I'm seeing 17 buildings, and they have a footprint of 4, and they're 3 stories high. So that comes out to 200. Well, it actually comes out to 204 buildings, and it asks for 202. On the water application commitment letter, it says that you're asking for 18 multifamily buildings with 12 units per building. So that's 260. So I'm wondering what the number is.
Until happens to be here, so against that.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Toby Orton. I'm the developer for this project. Some of the buildings will be 3-story, they'll be 2 stories. We have no more than 202 units. So the plan is just looking down and you're just seeing the footprint of the building, but they don't. Some of the buildings will adjust to be 2-story to make sure we don't go over 202.
So there's going to be 18 buildings. Does that include the pool building or 18 apartment buildings?
I don't have it in front of me, I can't recall, man, but the plan is, that's the plan.
That does include the clubhouse.
But it does say 18 buildings with 12 units per building, so not all buildings will have 12 units.
Yes, ma'am, and 18 does include the clubhouse.
Okay.
So there's no units in the clubhouse.
Sir,
Oh, no.
we need you on.
Yeah.
You can take that, but
That's okay.
we just need you on.
I think it's just the verbiage, the way it was written, that just slightly conflicts with the plan, but the goal would be no more than 202 units, to stick with, the complex of the R3 zone.
And this is just, if you could confirm, if we approve zoning for R3, it would be restricted to 202 anyway, correct?
So we need a motion?
Would you need a motion? I think that.
Would you like me to propose a motion?
Please, does it make sense? It seems to make sense to me that we do the rule waive first.
Let's do that. So motion to waive the waiting period for this, on these properties, so that you can consider the R3 zoning, the new R3 zoning request.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Thank you. We'll take a roll call vote. Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Councilman Cordell?
Yes.
Councilman Jackson?
Yes.
Yes, myself. Councilman Wood?
Yes.
Councilman McKenna?
Yes.
Councilman Nagel?
No.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you all. Next item will be the water request.
You wanna stick with zoning first, or you wanna go to water?
If you have a preference, you get to call.
Let's get the zoning out of the way. So the next motion could be to refer the R3 zoning to the planning board for review and recommendation, and to set a public hearing for June 27th at 6 PM, or some other date suitable to town council. It doesn't have to be on that date.
Everybody follow? Do we have a motion to that effect? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Ms. Cordell?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Yes, through me. Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. McKenna?
Yes.
And Mr. Nagel?
No.
Thank you. Motion passes 6-1. And our third item in this series of items, if you could state a motion for that, please.
Motion could be to approve the new water request conditioned upon annexation of the properties into the town's municipal limits.
Does everyone understand that this is the water request conditional on annexation being approved or perhaps our next meeting in June? Okay? If there's no questions, is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, sir.
And that's conditional on annexation, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Jackson for the first and Cordell.
I just want to make sure we had
Yes, conditions.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Ms. Cordell?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Yes, for me. Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. McKenna?
Yes.
And Mr. Nagel?
No.
Thank you. Motion passes 6-1.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Let's see, we're a little out of order, but if I'm following correctly, on my own agenda, our next item is, when your agenda reads item C, water line extension request for Pleasant Grove Town Homes and Public Works Director Pennell. Can you tell us about that?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the same request that was made at our previous meeting in April. Again, it's a proposed townhouse project on Pleasant Grove Road, just off of Main Street Road, just outside the town limits. It consists of 43 residential units, very similar to the North Ridge Commons townhouses or Cotfield, on about 10 acres of property. The applicants do not anticipate asking for annexation for this. And again, near town property, town limits, but not contingent. They're asking for a commitment of 22,000 gallons per day. And they're going to make two 6-inch taps into an existing town water line that runs in front of the property. And then a looped line through the property of about 1,400 feet that upon completion, they would turn over to the town for ownership and maintenance. And so from my standpoint, and looking at our water system and the lines in the area, the town has sufficient capacity to serve this development, both from a domestic standpoint and from a fire protection standpoint.
Are there any questions for Director Pennell? Ms. Cordell?
Does Woodfin have water right directly beside of this?
No, it's far up on the side of the mountain, nowhere near this one.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Mr. Pennell?
This is discontiguous from the town property lines. I would be outside.
That's correct. So this property is not contiguous to town, so therefore they're not seeking annexation, nor might be beneficial for us to go do annexation.
Provide service, go out of town, get back to town, and provide services.
That's correct. Am I missing anyone on Zoom? Okay, excellent. Are there any other questions for Mr. Pennell? If not, can I entertain a motion for this item?
Should you choose to make a motion to approve the water line extension request, would be in order.
I have one more question. They would
Oh,
be
sure.
charged out of town rates, correct?
That's correct. So they would, so not seeking annexation, they would charge out-of-town water rates. So is there a motion to, go on this item? I'll make such motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. We're doing a roll call vote.
Can we have council discussion?
Sure, Mr. Nagel, are there any questions or comments? Mr. Nagel, do you have something?
Yeah, I recommend, obviously a motion's been made in a second and we haven't, as a council. Anyways, yeah, I don't believe we should be selling water to anybody outside of town until the mayor finishes his water regionalization study that he just presented. So we asked him to do that, but we're not gonna wait till the results come in. So I would encourage you not to vote a yes on this and wait until we finish what we started. Thank you, Mayor.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item?
I just want to confirm we do have water, please.
Yes, on to Director Pennell. This is for approximately 50 towns.
4 units.
Thank you. So there is a motion on the table. Councilman Jackson, is there a second?
No.
No, that came from me, excuse me. How soon we forget? Is there a second?
Councilmember Jackson already seconded.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for keeping up to date on this. Never mind. We'll proceed with the vote now. Councilman Nagel, how do you vote?
No.
Councilman McKenna?
Yes.
Councilman Wood?
Yes.
I vote yes. Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Cordell?
No.
And Mr. Chase?
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you all. Next is item D, code amendment on solar collectors, sidewalk waivers, and chemical change. Mr. Eller.
Repeat information from the public hearing, again, additional standards applicable to solar collectors, whether they be roof mounted or ground mounted. The extension of the variables that the Board of Adjustment can consider for sidewalk waivers, and a minor technical change related to a reference to the planning and zoning board.
And Attorney Jackson, could you give us a recommended motion for this item?
Motion to adopt the ordinance amending Weaverville Town Code Chapter 20 concerning solar collector system, sidewalk waivers, and technical changes as presented.
Are there any questions or comments on this item, council? Am I missing anyone on Zoom, Trent?
No, sir.
Thank you. Is anyone, does anyone want to make the motion that the attorney just voiced?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Michelle got it. We'll do a roll call vote. Councilman Nagel?
Yes.
Councilman McKenna?
Yes.
Councilwoman Wood? Okay, yes. Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Cordell?
Yes.
And Mr. Chase?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Next item. Council Chair, you're coming up and sorry we made you wait so long, sir.
I'm just so excited.
Mr.
For the record, I remain Tom Bellister, and I still live at 26 Whitetail Drive. And it's always a pleasure to be here in your presence, to be able to address council and staff, what's going on with the Weaverville Center for Creative and Healthy Living, where I serve as chairperson. Since 1 October of last year, our not-for-profit organization has been able to bring on average 22 to 26 events each month through your beautiful community center. Some of these activities include daily and weekly events like Mahjong, Canasta, and bridge groups. We offer weekly Tai Chi, yoga, and line dancing lessons. There's creative writing and improvisational acting classes for adults and children. Weekly, we offer a space for groups who seek to meditate or those who want to share their personal journey for peace and wellness. There have been craft classes, book club, family game nights, a newcomers group, and we recently engaged the regional genetic health educators to present free lectures on topics like managing our cholesterol, sugar intake, and type 2 diabetes. Twice a month, Through our Music on the Back Porch program, Mountain Music Jam, we are able to keep alive a long-standing tradition. Local musicians coming together, play Americana music, and tell their incredible stories that have been passed down through generations. This has been an amazing kind of group and to watch it kind of grow. We have sponsored 2 outstanding plays via the Reader's Theater format, and we have sponsored a Storytellers Concert each quarter with the 3rd concert this Wednesday. Put it on your calendar, please. This Wednesday night will be our 3rd, and we look forward to seeing you there. All of this, and I again just have to reiterate, all of this has been offered through the generous spirit of our volunteers. Our board merely gathers comments from our fellow townsfolk, we hear their voices, and then we respond in kind by finding program champions to meet their spoken needs. Our board merely connects the dots, our volunteers do all the hard up and down lifting. We are fortunate to have so many people here in Weaverville who believe in what we are trying to do, which is build community, a mere effort in neighbors helping neighbors. There's much more that our board would like to do, especially for families and children. We haven't gotten there yet. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that I've been a student at UNCA for the last 8 semesters, and I'm now done. So I will have some more bandwidth to give to this project. Last year, the support of former Mayor Root, Ms. Coffey, Ms. Jackson, and other town staff through the development stages of creating our organization, the MOU, that we now share with the town was nothing short of outstanding. Again, I can't thank you enough on behalf of our board. We are also grateful for Shelby Stubble, our new recreation coordinator, who has helped us navigate this inaugural year of programming and overcoming the occasional obstacles of competing priorities or even furniture needs. She has been diligent in helping us make our schedule work, and we feel compelled to recognize her efforts. She's an amazing ambassador for a town. We're lucky to have her. The memorandum of understanding the town has with our board soon needs to be revisited for renewal, hopefully. Currently, we receive no funding except in the form of private donations, which have been few but critical to our existence in meeting the insurance requirements of the MOU. Nonetheless, our board hopes this evening's presentation spurs the council to further articulate your priorities regarding the future needs of our community and how our group might be a part of that effort. Please know that our board has given Mayor Fitzsimmons at his personal request a list of items we feel will help our organization grow, plus help the town as well. In closing, please know our board feels privileged to serve this council and the wonderful townsfolk who live here. We look forward to serving in the future by continuing this great experiment community health at its most organic level. Finally, we look forward to hearing what council seeks for future programming and how we can continue to be your partner in uplifting the health and wellness of our Weaverville friends and neighbors. And thank you, and I'm open to taking questions if you have any. You're welcome, Mr. Jackson. Yes, sir.
I just want to say you've done an outstanding job. I remember when we were looking at building the center, there's questions of if it would be used that much. And you have done a great job in getting the community involved. Also, others outside of your group, a friend of mine wanted to use a little space for an event and was told that every flag in the state is booked up until October. So
we are victims of our own success.
I think it's been more than successful.
And again, for our program, for our volunteer program, again, memorandum of understanding is very clear. Monday through Tuesday, we have right of first refusal, pretty much on Thursday. But Wednesday, again, we demur to our friends at the tailgate market, and then on Friday, pretty much we have access to some time in the morning. But from noon on, that's prime time for y'all to rent that building. And again, it's been very popular. The more people who show up and see your building, the more they love it, and it's been, Shelby and I were looking for a Friday evening to pencil something in, and they're just not there because they're booked, which is great news. So again, congratulations to all of you for having the courage to make the decision to build that building.
Other comments or questions from Mr. Bellister? So Tom, thank you very much. Your group is doing an outstanding job.
Thank you.
Outstanding job. And the level of programming is outstanding. And as COVID has lifted, participation has increased dramatically. It's really a wonderful thing to see.
And remember, Wednesday night, actually tomorrow night, music on the back porch at 7 o'clock. We have actually opened the doors at 6 on Wednesday for the storytellers group, and we have 4 exceptional women going to be telling stories that night, and then the playing fundraising event on Friday. So, yeah, lots going on, and thank you again.
And thank you, sir. And just remind council, if this, well, the renewal for this, if I'm not mistaken, is in October, I believe, for their normal use, so we need to consider that then. In the meantime, as we're going through budget season, I am recommending, and I already have recommended to town manager, that we include $5,000 in the budget to pay for some of the expenses the WCCHL has, which include things like their insurance. I forget you, Tom's going to do this, I'll go and share it with you, but to pay for those expenses that they are providing an outstanding service to our community at this point at $0. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everything.
Next up, formerly item G, parking update from Councilmember Cordell.
So, I'm Catherine Cordell, if we don't know. Patrick and I talked about an informal counting of parking spaces on the street and in the town lot. And so we just kind of started it as I'm walking the dog and I'm counting the spaces and that's what Patrick, and then Patrick's walking to dinner and counts the spaces and calls me. And then it kind of became like, okay, well, we're doing this 3 or 4 times a week. Let's just start writing it down. And so with that being said, we've counted the spaces on the street from the Yellow Mud to Twisted Laurel many times over the last 3 weeks. And what I've come up with is that the majority of the counts happened between 12 noon and 2 p.m. So we were looking at the lunchtime crowd. And then the other time we were looking quite often was at the dinner time, so from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. On average, when I averaged them all out, and then I threw out the ones where there were just absolutely everything was available because nobody was here for some reason. So I averaged the ones that we had, and I said there is available 28 spaces on the street, and the town lot had 16 spaces available on average every time that we did this. The heaviest day recorded was Tuesday, May the 17th, which was election day. And so I counted at 12:45 p.m., which was right around lunchtime and the election. And there was only 3 spots available in the town lot. And that was the least amount ever. But there was 27 spots still available on the street. So at that time, I said, I gotta start driving to the church lots. And so what I found was several spaces are being used at the First Baptist Church, but only 3 or 4 spaces are being used at the United Methodist and at the Presbyterian. So I do feel like that opening up the church lots has been a great thing. I still think probably encouraging the town merchants employees to park at the church lots. And, you know, I know that I was one of the original ones that talked to Al about this in the beginning, but it's only 1/3 of the mile from Yellow Mud to Town Hall. And it may feel like a long way, but, you know, a lot of us walk 2 or 3 miles every day. So for some of us, it's not a long way. And the other thing that I didn't even count the things that are in front of Town Hall or behind Town Hall, is parking.
You include the next one, did you?
No.
No.
We had spaces.
I know, but that just means there's more available and we've not ran out of parking.
I never see it.
But
I'm glad Councilmember Cordell has actually given a formal presentation of this. James and I, as well as Jennifer Jackson, we've all done this informally. We haven't taken the notes like you have, which is, it's fantastic, but we found the same thing. We found the same thing for now 4 years, I guess it is. And one of the things that I wanted to respond to is I have tried every possible way that I can through going through the WBA asking them to put it in their newsletter, asking them to speak to the business owners to encourage their employees to park in the spaces that we have negotiated with the churches. The one thing that I can tell you is that we may see some changes in that we are enforcing. We are enforcing parking in the 2 hour and 3 hour. If you'll take a look at your budget detail, you will see that we are enforcing it. So if nothing else works, we are enforcing it, and folks are having to pay for those citations.
So we don't have a parking problem, we get a walking problem.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I will say that, and thank you, Catherine, for helping us produce this highly scientific study. But what we've done typically is if you want to park in those 2 blocks right in front of Wellbred and the barber shop, those are usually pretty crowded. But beyond that, there's always more than that for parking. So I think as Councilman Jackson said, we have a walking problem more than a parking problem. And just to address, give you a little story about what the manager was talking about. One day, Selena and I were actually having lunch at Twisted Laurel, and our wait person said to us, "Excuse me, I'm going to be gone for a few minutes because I have to go and move my car where it's illegally parked, to another spot." And we said, "We're probably not the people we need to be saying that to, but thank you for revealing what we suspected, which is employees aren't using the parking lots at the street."
I was worried about our food. It had not been brought to our table yet, so.
So I happened to be, I joined during COVID. So I joined the Greenville Business Association during COVID, because one of my part-time jobs, is running an Airbnb. And so I know Sarah, who is the newsletter person, and I will talk to her about putting that out there.
Good, that'd be great. Thank you. Any other questions for Councilman Cordell?
Yeah, Patrick, just a comment. I really appreciate Catherine's comments there. And we're going to just have to work together to make people, I'll call it, feel a little uncomfortable about driving around Weaverville and have to push employees, push visitors to go off the beaten path and park there. If we're going to keep this a walkable small town center, we're never going to have enough park to support people's driving habit. That's just the way it is. And we've got to take these opportunities to start pushing, the people that are working in the stores to work, park in these off lots and then walk the third of a mile or whatever it is. It's not a big price, but it's going to take a lot of little efforts, I think, just to change the mindset. But appreciate you doing that, Catherine.
Well, it's only a mile from town hall to the post office. It feels like a long distance, but that's what it is.
Any other questions or comments on Ms. Cordell's study? Okay, hearing none, thank you all. Thank you, Councilman Cordell, for that. Next item is the I-26 Bridge Replacement Project, and will you try to give us an update on this, please?
Yes, thank you. So we've got 2 I-26 bridges that go over Quarry Road, and this is over the gated property, the town's gated property past the Public Works facility, and it also crosses Reeves Creek in that area. There's an eastbound I-26 and a westbound. And these bridges have been on a replacement list for quite some time, and if anybody's ever been back in there, if you look up under that bridge, you can very quickly see why they're on a replacement list. So we've been, I think, waiting for our turn to get that bridge replaced. So the DOT representatives have recently contacted the town in order to move forward with the project in the hopes that their construction mobilization can begin as early as September of this year. Public Works Director Dale Pennell has met with NCDOT representatives and others involved in the project several times in order to really understand what the project consists of and its effect on the town. In particular, Quarry Road, Public Works operations within that gated, secured portion of the road, the police department firing range, which is also back there. The town has been told that the vast majority of this construction will be occurring from above, just off of the current bridges. But there will be some equipment that needs to be placed underneath it, and there will be at times some bit of access that they have to be underneath those bridges, including on town property. And because of that, they have come to you with a request for a temporary construction easement. There are some maps that are in your packet. There's one that has some colored areas on it showing a temporary construction easement, which is a 0.062 acre parcel, a permanent drainage easement of 0.075 of an acre, and then a permanent right-of-way to extend that right-of-way just a little bit, which is 0.325 acres. All of those are shown in your packet materials. James has them up on the screen. In addition, they've got a right of entry. They don't have a right-of-way over Quarry Road. And so they will need a right of entry over that secured gated portion. And Dale has worked with them in order to make sure that they maintain the security of that road. They only limit the road closures for 15 minutes at a time so that our operations are not interfered with. And that the firing range at the end is secured so that there is no access at the end to that firing range, plus a little bit of a turnaround in there to get vehicles so they don't have to back out and turn around. So all of this is proposed. The current proposal for this for these right-of-way deeds and the agreement for entry is $11,000. I think there's probably a little bit of leeway in that amount, although if we get too out of range, we've been told that we really have to justify why there's an increase. And if we get too far out of range, then they will just take this to a condemnation action and let the courts work out the amount. And so what's before you today is whether you feel like $11,000 is an appropriate figure for this, or whether you want to see if we can get a little bit more for it, and whether you're okay with going ahead and approving the documents as requested.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Where do they come up with $11,000?
They've got teams of people that sort of calculate that and value that. I think it's a bit of a.
It reminds me of signs you see going into a place, speed limit 13 miles an hour. So why don't you put 10,000, 15,000, or 11,000? Just seems.
Interestingly enough, I thought the same thing, that it was an odd number for them to send to us. I think it's 6,900 something originally.
It's a very specific amount.
And I went back, my original thought was to go back and say 11. So it's funny that you said 11. But I think we have the opportunity to ask for more, given the constraints that Attorney Jackson has told us about not going too far, because they obviously can take it.
I told Patrick, I really think $11,000 is just a total insult. That's ridiculous, low amount. I mean, for example, US Sailor pays the town $22,000 to lease a little spot, and they pay that every year. And this is just a lease, and they go in and out that road 2 or 3 times a year. Here's somebody who wants us a permanent right of way, and they're gonna be using heavy equipment to come around a town road that we know they're probably going to damage with this heavy equipment. So one of the things that I was thinking, I know they say that, they can limit the access and, only be in and out for 15 minutes at a time. But if you want to see road damage, go and look at what the heavy trucks do on New Stock Road when they come from the quarry and get on 26.
There is an agreement that if they have, damaged roads, they have an obligation to repair those.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking, not that it would, I'm on the negotiator, I can be, but I'm not the negotiator for us. But, the state has all the equipment to pave roads and widen roads and fix roads. And so, rather than worry about $11,000, which seems like a really measly amount, wonder if we could negotiate that when this is said and done, that they will be responsible for widening and paving all of the lakeshore around the lake. I know it's a town road, but the town road is the one they're gonna damage when they come in and out with big equipment.
We can certainly propose that to them. I think they're gonna probably, they have right-of-way agents that are sort of charged with negotiating these things. And my guess is that they're not, that's probably not something that they're gonna be willing to entertain. We can certainly throw that to them. But I think at the end, they're gonna wanna know a value. And I think that the value that they would have to place with the court is probably gonna be lower than the value to pay that, which is, I don't know, Dale, do you have an idea of what that cost is?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Jackson, but they do already have a right of way.
Yes, absolutely.
So they already have a right of way and they are not paying us for it.
This is just expanding that just by a third of an acre, and that sounds actually bigger than it is. It's just adding this tiny little bit of a strip to the existing right of way.
Well,
And the permanent drainage easement.
ask for the moon, take the stars. That's kind of what my motto, but.
There is some time pressures on this, and so if town council wants to throw out a number, I can get, while you're listening to your quarterly reports, I can see if I can get some feedback from them. I think they would love to go ahead and get this resolved tonight if possible. So if town council has a thought.
I don't have a figure, like I said, but Doug brought up the point, we had talked about how did they come up with that number, it would be, if the land in Weaverville is so valuable, as we say it is, and an average acre sells for $100,000 or whatever, then what's a third of an acre worth?
This is also on former landfill property we're using floodplain. So again, I don't know that fair market value on a piece of property out of those areas is probably
Some
more.
of the other groups though that we've talked to have wished that they could, that we could use this with greenway along the.
And that is still permissible. This would not interfere at all with that.
Would town council be amenable to a $25,000 figure?
I think that it would probably be easier to negotiate if we come back with them with a counter offer as opposed to asking for something undefined. So.
I raised $25,000 because it's very close to our US Cellular lease amount. I don't know.
That sounds reasonable.
And it's a round number.
It seems like if this went up to the courts, you would spend correctly more than that amount very quickly, so.
Would you like me to ask to see if 25,000 is within there?
Do you think they're available to talk to you at this point or right now?
Yeah.
Great, if you would do that while we hear from our fire chief and police chief, that would be great.
Thank you, Jennifer.
While we await news on that, if we could hear from Fire Chief Williams. Chief Williams, your last go out, man, make it big.
That's right. Mayor and council, thank you for the opportunity to once again present quarterly numbers for the fire department. As you've seen in the documents provided in your packet, our calls for the quarter have remained consistently above 500. Most of the areas of response have been pretty static in regards to the types of calls we're responding to. A couple of things I'll point out. Our calls within an 8-minute standard have gone up to just over 71%, which I think is a positive. We'll point out also that our percentage of overlapping calls continues to increase. which again, I think aids in justifying the fact that we need that two-company response that we currently are utilizing. I'll also point out that this past quarter, we've seen significantly more calls outside the town limits versus the North Buckham District. And we did experience a pretty high fire loss this quarter, and that's due to 4 vehicle fires and a skid steer fire that was in the woods. Hard to get to. Vehicle fires are generally very, very high loss of the total value, just due to the simple fact that they are, if a car catches on fire, it's typically towed. So that's a number that we're not very proud of, but the fact that it was automobiles and not structures leads us to be able to handle that number a little better. As far as the prevention education stuff out of the fire marshal's office, those numbers also remain consistent. We'll let you know that end of school year activities will be occurring over the next week to 2 weeks, where our folks will be spending a lot of time at the schools doing end of class celebrations with the school kids, some water activities and things of that nature. So we will be participating in that. I will end by saying thank you, council. Thank you very especially to Manager Coffey. 6 years ago, gave me the opportunity to serve my fire department in a capacity that I would never dream. So I'm very appreciative. I appreciate the folks like Chief Penley, Chief Sims, Mr. Gudger that came before me. And lastly, I just encourage council, while I don't agree with everything that's been said through social media and other avenues, I do still contend that if we are not competitive from a pay standpoint, the fire department will suffer, and I think our town citizens will suffer. So I please urge you to beg you to just make sure that we are competitive. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for the chief? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Police Chief Davis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just let you start with this quarterly report. We did have 1,787 calls this quarter. That number that went up, or number, I should say, each month went up consecutively from the reporting period February to March, March to April, with increasing numbers as you might expect. Because of the more activity in our community. Our arrests are, we had 34 arrests this last quarter, and we had 36 last year, so we're about the same as we were. We had 44 vehicle collisions, which is more than we had last year at this time, but there was one less injuries, you can see. Those are or if you can't see them with the font being so small, those are some of the activities and the arrests that we have on that. If you have any questions, just let me know. These response times that we have, again, you can see February to March and to April. Each of those numbers are going up, as you might expect during those periods, but not overly so. I'm not overly concerned with the amount of response time. This is all within the norms as seen in previous years. The next slide, I'll bring your attention to the SPI Crime Index. Now, this is a 10-year crime trend that we have here. These numbers are, we do is we give these numbers to the SPI, they vet those numbers, and then they give them back to us. Those numbers are typically run about a year behind it and a little bit more. As you can see, the most available numbers that we have on 21. But if you look at the pink shaded line and also for violent crime, and there's also another pink line on that for property crime. You can see that there's a, in the pink shaded, you can see that there's really no upward trend. We are averaging in 10 years about 5 violent crimes a year. years. It's about as flat line as you can come over a period of 10 years. Property crime, you can see there's a upward trend, a slightly upward trend, which I've mentioned previously about what our trends are like. But having said that, they're not historically high. Historically high, these numbers, again, they average about 165 per year for the last 10 years, if you take those numbers and add them up. And let me take your attention to the next slide. This one, all of these numbers are based on a population of 100,000. Now, obviously, we're not in a population of 100,000 here, but that's what is based on to give a baseline for every community. Look at the red, that indicates the number, or the number per 100,000 that we have in Weaverville. And that's compared to, I know I've been asked a few times about where do we stand with other communities. If you look at Weaverville, you look at Woodfin, look at Black Mountain, and then I did a comparison with Asheville and Buncombe County as a whole. That's the entire population of Buncombe County and the state. When you look at those numbers of property crimes, you can see that we're relatively high, relatively speaking, with that of Woodfin, Black Mountain. And for that matter, the state and North Carolina, the only one that's really higher than us is Asheville. With that, you can also see the blue line, and so if you look at the blue line, that's barely, you can barely see it on there for a wild crime. It is extremely low. So they take these numbers and they average them out with that. And so if you were to get onto crimerate.org, just Google crimerate.org, bestplaces.net, citydata.com. All of those are using a calculation based on these SBI crime statistics. So that's what they're looking at. It's really not fair. The reason I say that a lot of that's not fair, you take our relatively low population, which we have. We have 4,500, 4,567, correctly, James. Then you look at other places such as Woodfin that has 6,600 for a population. Black Mountain has 8,000. Well, none of those locations have stores that are regional draws. None of those have a geographic area like we do. We get our, there's a lot of population that comes out of different counties, Madison County. So all of those numbers, when you look at it, I know that this will bring up a question of, well, of those 187 crimes that we had in 2020. So I'm using 2020 because those are the last stable numbers that I have that were vetted by SBI. You look at those numbers. We had a total of 178 property crimes in 2020. Out of those, there were 101 were reported by one business as being the victim, as one business location. And that's 57% of our total property crimes.
What percent of that?
57%, well, almost 57, 56 point something percent. There were 11 other property crimes that happened at that location. Whenever somebody might have left a pocketbook in, a buggy or something of that nature. But with that, that's why that high number that you'll see, it's not really conducive. I don't think it's not really helpful to compare us because it makes it look like we have a high crime rate, which all are. I'm happy to answer questions that you might have.
I'll just say the first, very interesting charts, thanks for producing that. I think it's also interesting to note that our crime rate, particularly our violent crime rate, is so low, and even though it's remained fairly constant the past 10 years, our population increased during that same period of time by 40-some%. So in reality, our violent crime rate is actually declining in terms of racial population. So that's very good news. I do think that the one business we have is consuming 57% of our time in our police work. We need to find a way to address this. I think this is not okay that one business is consuming so much police officers' time. This business is becoming a nuisance to our police department. So I encourage people to be creative about how we can address this problem in the future.
I've contacted many of the police chiefs and trying to come up with ideas. I'm still going through that process, and they're of a similar thought process. And their numbers, quite frankly, they don't.
Any kind of ideas you come up with from talking to your colleagues, that would be very good. This is a costly problem for the town. Any other questions or comments for the police chief? Thank you, sir. Attorney Jackson, heard anything?
I have. So the right-of-way agent that I have been speaking with, who's been the lead on all of these conversations, her authority only goes up to 15,000. So if you wanted to back off and say 15,000, we could do that today. Anything above that, including the 25,000, has to go to your DOT negotiating agents, which she says usually takes a couple of weeks. And so if you wanna submit 25,000 as the counter offer, what we'll do is we can put this back on next agenda and see what they say. What she advises me is that whatever DOT comes back with as their next offer, if they don't accept the 25,000, is probably going to be a take it or leave it. And if we don't accept that, then they'll go ahead and proceed with condemnation.
What is the will of council on this matter? Give it a try.
I have a question. If they come out with an offer, could it be less than 11,000? They couldn't do that, could it?
I would not think so. They want to resolve this just as much as we want to resolve it.
But they could.
They could.
What does condemnation mean?
That's a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So the offer could be zero.
It can't be zero because they have to submit just compensation. And a court is going to be, the question is not whether they can take this land, the jury decision would be made as to whether DOT's offer is fair and just compensation for the land that is being taken.
My thought is, for what it's worth, it does have a lot of negatives. It's not like we were talking about flat land, like a pasture or something. You're in the floodplain, you're in a landfill location, and
You're adjacent to the highway.
yeah, so I think I would just about leave you go to 15,000, wrap it up. That's just my thoughts.
Could you make a motion to that effect?
Yes.
So the motion is to take the 15,000. Is there a second on it?
Is to authorize the mayor and staff to execute the right-of-way agreement and the agreement concerning entry for 15,000. Is that in the motion?
Any questions or comments on this motion? Is there a second?
I liked the earlier suggestion of 25, just to sort of test the limits here a little bit. And what I'm hearing is worst case, it might get reviewed for a couple of weeks and kicked back to the original thing. But that's just me.
We've got a motion. Did I hear a second? Michelle second.
Michelle second. So there's been a motion and a second to accept the offer of 15,000. Is there any more comments or questions on this matter?
Well, Jeff made a comment.
Jeff made a comment. So hearing that, would you want to change your motion in any way?
I wouldn't name it, make it 25,000 if that's what consensus is. No problem.
Wait a minute.
So
Motion's
we've got
already
a
been
motion.
Made.
All right, do you want to withdraw that motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So the motion's been withdrawn. The motion to accept the 15,000 has been withdrawn. Mr. McKinnon, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we offer 25,000.
Point of clarification, Attorney Jackson, Michelle seconded that motion. Does she have to withdraw her second as well?
You want to withdraw your second? Sure.
So now there's a motion on the floor to negotiate for the 25,000 figure. Is there a second on this? I'll second that. So let's do a roll call vote, and the motion again, you could just remind us, make sure we know what we're voting on here, Attorney Jackson.
Is to propose a counteroffer of 25,000.
So, Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Ms. Cordell,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson, I'm yes. Ms. Wood, Mr. McKenna,
Yes.
Mr. Nagel.
Yes.
All right, unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll be revisiting this probably pretty soon. So, happy agenda tonight, council folks. Thank you for your thoughtfulness and thank you for your important work tonight.
Hey, Patrick, can you indulge me for 3 minutes before
Sure.
we close the meeting?
Sure enough.
Hey, Selena, make sure and set the timer, will you?
Did you say 3 seconds?
Yeah, right. I can't see the audience. Is still there firemen and town folks still in the audience?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So what I got to think about this for the last 2.5 hours, and I'm going to take the exiting chief at his word. I've asked him before, what do you think we should pay? So I suggest we make the higher in rate $18 an hour, which multiplied by 2,900 hours, because I'm tired of all the BS, it'll be $53,000. So we're not going to have a hard time hiring firemen. I suggest we make the higher end rate $18 an hour for all firemen and policemen, and that we raise subsequently all firemen and police pay the same amount, which is about 20%. So that means the fire chief will make $125,000 in the future. I also suggest we raise the property tax for the town of Weaverville so they can put their money where their mouth is, from 35 cents to 40 cents per 100. I will not vote for any budget that doesn't include that. So there you go, folks. We heard you loud and clear. We're embarrassed by what we pay our firemen. You shamed me. I appreciate it. 18 an hour, higher end rate. Everybody else gets a 20% raise, and we're going to raise taxes by 20%. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your suggestion, Councilman Nagel. We'll be seeing more specifics.
Councilman Nagel, I thank you for that. One of the things, if this goes forward, we are going to have a huge compression problem with our entire pay scale. Huge. I cannot tell you the extent of that, but it will be more than a 5-cent tax increase. So I'm happy to bring that information back to you, but it is going to have a huge impact on our entire pay scale, because anytime you move certain grades, you have to move others. So just throwing that out there, I'm happy to put whatever town council wishes to put in the budget, but I do want to make that known for the record.
And actually, I think we'll see more specific information on this issue as we move through the budget process, and the town manager has already prepared some very good suggestions on this front, which you'll be hearing from soon. But thank you for your comments, Councilman Nagel. Is there any other business to come before this important? I'm sorry, we might have taken public comments tonight. Is there any more thing we can take? Any more brought to this body this evening? Seeing none, we are adjourned.